Hello, Internet, and I'm here today because I just wanted to essentially rant, I guess, about the whole DC Rebirth thing, and I'm going to try to balance my cynicism, which weighs heavy, as you all know, and try to inject some gosh for darned optimism in there. But, yeah, just kind of want to talk through it because I think some of the problems that I have with where a lot of these comics are at right now is really showing through the cracks of how this is all being handled. Here we are again. We are looking at what DC is branding a rebirth. For all intents and purposes, this is a reboot in my mind. If you want to call it a reset or a reboot or what have you, fine. None of us actually know the exact details of how it's going to work canonically and how they're inevitably going to wrap it into the whole multiverse idea. That's not really the point. The point is they're making a sharp, drastic shift from the storylines in every comic into something new, and how drastic that's going to be will be interesting to see, because we've already gotten a chunk of it in Batman. I don't even know how it's quite going to work with Superman and those associated families, and a lot of these other characters, and some of them are going to be more drastic than others, I'm sure, much like when the New 52 happened. And frankly, the fact that we're getting this cycling up of this sort of thing is worrying in and of itself. This is an older media cycling up whatever it can to create interest in sales faster and faster and faster, which are death throes of a dying medium. And in this case, I'm not even saying just comics, but specifically, yeah, superhero comics. We're seeing things like this echoed Marvel as well, but we're talking about DC right now. In trying to prepare and deciding what comics I wanted to get and understand just what was happening with this, I purposely didn't want to follow the news too closely. And when it was initially announced, I said, okay, I'm going to wait a little bit and wait until some of the dust settles and some of the rejiggering that inevitably is going to happen goes away, so that when I look at the information, I can just pick out the comics I want. The first time I've been able to come across that information is after I've already had to make my decisions because of the way comic ordering works. You really have to decide a little over 2 months in advance because of the way everything goes through Diamond, which I've been over. So, the first time I've been able to see not even the amount of information I initially wanted, which is titles, creators, and just a little blurb about the direction they're taking. Nothing much, but I mean a sentence or two, which really shouldn't be much. I still don't even have all that. The closest I've come is looking today. I found something on Wikipedia, and in doing so, just snapping to the bottom, I'm seeing references from January, February, March, and then a lot in March, and then May, and then April, and it's just months of these little titles being, the whole thing being rejiggered to the point where, I couldn't have even decided ahead of time up until basically the deadline of having to get these orders in. And in doing so, it seems like the creators on titles have changed. The direction of some of it has changed. How often some of these comics are shipping has changed, which plays a huge factor into what I want to get. And I really did pare down. Ultimately, I just decided to go Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and I was fairly confident in that. And then I just found out what's happening with Batman, and suddenly I'm really questioning it. I haven't been a huge fan of what Scott Snyder did in the latter half of his run recently. Some people really like it. All well and good. I'm not even going to get into that. I just figured there's enough Bat books to go around that if I wanted to stay with Scott Snyder, I would stay with Scott Snyder. But if I wanted to try a different Bat book, I easily could. And to my understanding, Tom King was going to be writing Batman. Great. someone I haven't really read any of, and just stay with Batman, and it was all going to be fine. Then I'll see how that goes, and if I heard great things later, I could go buy comics later. But that isn't the case. Apparently, Scott Snyder is not only on this all-star Batman book, which using that title is very telling that DC doesn't understand the legacy of that book being shit. That no title associated with Batman has a worse reputation than that one. The fact that they're using that again is really telling to me that they don't understand what they're doing on some level, specifically with that book. But then to throw Scott Snyder back onto the main Batman book is super annoying because I understood he was going to be on this other book, and the fact that he's doing two Bat books at once is really worrying because I really feel like anytime a creator is on more than one book of the same character at the same time, things really start to suffer after a short period of time because they get burnt out on that character. They only have so much they can put in for that one character for so long, especially when they've been on that character for years already. So that was one thing that really made me dig in and start looking around a bit more. I say diversity is a problem. When I say that with the climate we're in 2016, the mind jumps to talking about the number of female characters, what races are being depicted, just generally more than white dudes jumping around dealing with problems. And we should be there. If you look at DC's history, there are a great deal of characters to draw from, tons of lineage. They touched on a lot of this. If they weren't the first, they were certainly in there, and they certainly have a legacy with this stuff that they are refusing to touch. I just want to kind of read down the titles that are here because the diversity I'm talking about is just even creatively devoid. We are looking at Batman, Detective Comics, Batgirl, Nightwing, All-Star Batman, and then Batgirl and the Birds of Prey. Now, holy crap. Now, first of all, even just jumping back a few years, Batgirl and the Birds of Prey is a problem for diversity in a number of ways. The little blurb that we have is Black Canary, Huntress, and Barbara Gordon. That's barely even a team, and that is the majority of female characters that are represented at DC anymore. But also, everything I just listed is tied directly to Batman. None of this has an identity outside of Batman. But that's kind of their bread and butter, so let's just say we let that slide. Next, we're looking at Action Comics, Superman, Wonder Woman for some reason tied in, I guess because they were dating, New Superman, Superwoman, Supergirl, and Trinity. Okay, so off of one guy we're spawning a whole lot, then we're getting female deviations from him, which if we're going to talk about characters having their own identity and having a certain representation of diversity, we are now in an age where we have to be past these sort of offshoot characters. This is ridiculous. And reading about Superwoman, I'm actually kind of interested. I didn't know Phil Jimenez was going to be on it, and that it was going to be focusing on Lois Lane. That is somewhat interesting to me. However, that does get to a problem that I do want to address in my next little bit. But to continue on, there's the Justice League segment with Aquaman, The Flash, Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan's Green Lantern book, The Justice League, Titans, Cyborg, the token black character at this point, which in a way just them having only the one makes it worse. Then there's the Justice League of America. It's so samey that it's almost confusing why they're delineating, Justice League versus Justice League of America. That pick a different title with different things to make it diverse enough so that people have a reason to buy two different books. And then Teen Titans. okay. Then we have Other, which should be at least where we're getting a little bit more, but no. Green Arrow, Deathstroke. Harley Quinn is at least another female character, and one that they really do have to push at this point. But the Hellblazer, which you could argue might be the token gay, but that's me assuming. Also, I'd like to point out, they don't know who the hell the artist on that book is going to be yet. That is to be announced as of right now. That's problematic. Alright, Red Hood and the Outlaws. Drop this book already. Okay. Suicide Squad. At least a vaguely different team. Blue Beetle. I guess we get half of a bit of diversity there. Super Sons. And then Batman Beyond. I love Batman Beyond, but if you're going to be publishing Batman Beyond, you have to publish fucking just anything else that doesn't have the word Batman in it first. Just literally anything. Literally anything. Because you're starting a new line, and you need to initially draw new readers, which means you have to appeal to some demographic or something different than you did before. And this lineup is such a paring down to proven ideas, and then maybe giving offshoot titles, but only off of those proven ideas. When I say proven ideas, for the most part, we're talking about stuff with at least a 50-year legacy. There's some stuff, Harley Quinn, not so much, but so hot right now and coming off the new 52, they have to do that. But like Super Sons, stuff like that, that's their idea of new. It's not. It's just another book with these characters that come from these 50-plus year legacy characters. And dear Lord, if you want to survive, you have to do something fresh, you have to do something new, and you have to do something relevant. Look at how much buzz We Are Robin's got. There is literally nothing like that on this list, because they can't take a risk for something that inevitably wasn't huge, but was fairly successful and spawned a fairly big shakeup in their line that caused a relatively well-selling event for all things considered, especially considering the amount of advertising they put into it. It's annoying. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know a good comic when I read it. And this amount of hegemony means less good comics. There's no two ways around that. We need to talk about the creators being pulled in. And I say this more for the writing than the art, because what I'm going to say is there are far too many old hands in this lineup. We're seeing Scott Snyder. I know he was something of a star writer, but we're seeing him too far. I've already kind of gone over that. We are seeing Francis Manapul being pulled in as a writer again, despite not being well received as a writer. We're seeing Dan Abnett. We're seeing Sam Humphries. We're seeing Rob Vendetti. We're seeing Christopher Priest come back to this after years. We're seeing Phil Jimenez come in. We're just seeing so many old hands, and we're seeing absolutely no new talent here. Now, again, there's a few names on the artist list, and I feel the only reason we're getting that is because it's born out of necessity, because you can have a writer take on 2, technically 3 books in your line, but generally artists can only do 1 book at a time. And so just that need has solved this problem for them on that end. But the fact that we're getting basically no new talent in the writing department, and we're just getting the same people who have led to the need for this constant recycling, is bad. We need some fresh blood in the game. We need some people with some new ideas, and maybe they're going to be a little bit rough. But frankly, right now, energetic but rough would make for such a different comic in DC's lineup that it might actually be better. And they do need to pull back from some of the editorials. Some of the stuff becomes so samey, especially in the artistic department from editorial. DC's had that problem for a long time. These comics need to be their own entities. They need to be able to be their own freaking comic. And there's so much here, and there's so much of the same thing over and over again. Like, Ethan Van Sciver's on Green Lantern again. Can he do any other book? Like, are they just not letting him? It's maddening. It's just, I'm looking at this, and supposedly these are going to be new books with new creative directions, but how can they be when you have the same names on the same characters again? It's not anything new. We're just getting a whole bunch of stupid renumbering problems, essentially. Let's talk about some of the numbers, and this lightly tackles a few different problems. The first and the biggest one is they're doing this whole relaunch, and they're doing Rebirth issue #1, and then they're doing #1 of the series. Why? That is just stupid. That is annoying. That is putting me off of trying a lot of different books, because essentially it's the first issue, and then we're jumping into the second issue on a #1. It shouldn't really matter. The comic inside is the comic, but such a boneheaded, stupid decision really makes me question anything on the fringe of anything around this stupid mandate, because it's stupid. And dumb. And really stupid. There's no frickin' reason for it. It makes it more complicated for no goddamn reason. It is so maddening. I just talk in circles about it. So, yeah. That really rubs me the wrong way. Secondly, again, talking about some of the changes, whether or not some of these books are shipped twice monthly or shipped once monthly has gone all over the place, and some of the books that they're choosing to do this with make no sense. I understand something like Action or Detective being shipped twice monthly. That makes a lot of sense. But stuff a little off, I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing some of the stuff, Superwoman shipped monthly, sure, but Supergirl shipped monthly and not twice monthly? Seems stupid. Supergirl, because they have a hit TV show, not my favorite reason, but it is what it is. They don't want to push into that right now. They don't want to get more Supergirl out there after years of neglect of that character, even though, yeah, it's tied to Super and whatever, and that's stupid. But what are they doing? What are they thinking? This whole line, initially, from what I heard, was supposed to tie into the media better. But we get a Hellblazer comic, but they killed the TV show. But we're getting a Supergirl thing here, and that gets a little bit of love. But then Green Arrow gets shipped twice monthly, but is that going to have anything to do with the show anyways? Because what they've done with that character in the comics has been all over the map for years, and not knowing where they're going with the character or anything really doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. I'm willing to check it out because he's been one of my favorite characters now for a while, but if that book isn't good right off the bat, it's getting dropped hot, fast. I mean, yeah, they do Harley Quinn twice, of course, but then Hellblazer gets shipped monthly, which I guess makes sense, especially since I don't know what the hell they're doing with it. But I mean, whether or not they're doing this monthly or twice monthly is just all over the map, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, and it's maddening. And some of these books that I would like to check out, I don't want to because they're shipping twice monthly. And also, with complete no understanding of the market, they haven't said anything about how they're going to collect this stuff in trades. I could see the argument for that being a relatively smart thing. They're trying to push these issues. They want these issues' sales numbers up. That makes a lot of sense. They're not talking about the digital plane at all either, which is annoying. But the fact that they're not talking about trades at all is a misstep, because that's where the numbers are going up, supposedly. It's all anecdotal evidence because no one will release the numbers. But people are more likely to want to go buy trades of this stuff, especially if you're shipping twice monthly, because they're going to be coming out relatively regularly, And people would rather have a nicer package of a trade, and that's a lot more marketable with less or no ads and something you can ship and they can sit down and read for a little bit, and it's not a kind of floppy, weird, digestible issue. It's something a lot easier to sell someone on. The trade market has exploded in the past while, but they keep, to their detriment, focusing on issues and issues and issues. And why? Their Earth 1 line, even if it's not a great comic, blows up because people want that like chunk of comic at a time. If you're doing 2 comics a month, what if you just made it every other month you got a slightly smaller trade? Like, there's a lot of things that they could do to actually really shake this up and really do something to tackle the market the way it is today. But they're sticking to the same old thing. And this Rebirth might start being the nail in the coffin for most DC comics. I don't think we're going to see a lot of this go away in our lifetimes completely, but they could be pared down significantly if they don't do something to frickin' try. Good news? The good news is this looks like they're trying to at least pare down some of the stuff that honestly wasn't working from the new 52, and they're trying to get their bearings. For some of the things that I complained about earlier, it looks like DC, for everything else, is trying to focus on getting a few comics out there and just make sure that they're trying to sell some decent stories. I got some vibes from the idea that they're trying to maybe loosen up on editorial a bit, play on their legacy a bit, which is smart because that was a lot of what was lost in the new 52. And if you have to pick one title that energized people and got people excited, as much as I was saying what I did about the old hands and whatnot, Wonder Woman is that book. Wonder Woman was something with the new 52 that they ultimately failed. They started out so strong, they did something new, they did something kind of daring with the character that wasn't against her history or any of that, but it did kind of take a character in a direction that a lot of diehard fans of Wonder Woman didn't necessarily like. But it told a good story, and it needed those elements to happen in order to tell that story. And then the second that story was done, they turned around, and a lot of why people didn't want to read Wonder Woman comics came right back, and now I think they're addressing that, and they're getting a fan favorite writer on her, which is something of a rarity with that character, and they're really pushing forward. And the fact that Wonder Woman is kind of the big news out of this, I think is kind of cool, but it is also kind of sad that she's about the only major character that only has her own book. But that's a representative problem. From my perspective, that means we're getting a character that's not going to have a lot of fringe stuff happening to her that's going to randomly impact the story I'm reading, and we're just going to get a cool dang comic. So the upswing, I think, is if you pare down to some of the stuff that's going to be doing its own thing, and maybe if editorial can back off a little bit, we should be getting some cool comics from this thing. And maybe the fact that they're focusing on less comics and maybe just can put a little more energy into creating a handful of really good comics means ultimately a net positive. So I'm hoping that's the way it's going to steer, and that some of this other stuff that I complained about will all go away. And it will start to get better once they kind of reignite the core. So here's hoping it ends up being a positive thing.